Welcome to Worth the Effort's Lunch Discussion, our little bi-weekly unscripted segment where I talk about what we have been doing, what we plan on doing for the upcoming weeks. We'll go over market news, a segment that a lot of people seem to be liking, where I share my experience selling and marketing. I tell you what we've done in the past weeks and what's coming up so that you can either learn from it or learn from my mistakes to apply what you want to do to sell your own wares when the time comes. And to make it worth your while, every segment we cover one tool or technique at the end and a little discussion talking about the pluses and minuses of how we work. This week we're going to be talking about scrapers, which personally I think get a bad rap in the woodworking world because they are infinitely versatile and I really do enjoy using them because they get me out of a lot of scrapes. Now, since our last discussion, I finished up all those trees I was talking about and all the little wooden bowls, and I've also been looking for a new place to put the workshop. As you know, we were a woodworking school in Austin where rents are kind of high, and I just don't need this much space. Plus, I've sold all the workbenches to cover the rent up until this point. So I just am looking for a small place to do my little woodworking, maybe close to an area that I could get a secondary job to pay the bills. I haven't found a few places that might be in my price range. I haven't finalized anything in there. I was lucky because the person who is going to lease this place right after me is a woodworker, and when he came in, the first thing he said was, "Are my racks for sale?" And of course, being a woodworker, everything we make is for sale for the right price. And we negotiated enough of a sum so that I could repair some vandalized damage to my truck, and I might have enough money for a deposit on some of these places. I don't have enough money for the first month's rent yet, but we still have 2 more weekends to go there, and I still have to figure out how to pay for the moving. In between the turning of the trees and the bowls, it's one of those situations where I use a oil finish where you apply the oil, you let it sit for 15-20 minutes, and then you wipe off as much as you can. Well, normally I would do that all in one time to do them all at once, but this past week I would turn a tree, I would lay the oil on it while it's still on the lathe so that I could buff it and stuff while it's still there, and while that oil was soaking in, I would go pack up one box. So I pretty much got the school all packed up so I can literally just pick stuff up and put it in the back of the truck and move to wherever I need to go. And as I said, I found a couple places. I'm going to go look at one place later this week. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an office, so I will have to build an office because I need some place to live, but we'll figure something out there. Hopefully I can get 1 month's free rent to pay for building an office. I also began filming our next project build. I don't really do a lot of project builds because I've been going off of this education aspect, but I'm going to try and do projects a little bit more often, maybe once a week is my goal. Simply because, hey, I'm making stuff for art market, so it's a small production drawing that I think a lot of y'all could benefit from. So I'm going to try and do one project build a week, and maybe after the first year, I will substitute one of my educational videos for one project video so that I can finish that 12-course series that I've got all blueprinted out, ready to rock and roll. But this upcoming build video, I think is probably one of the best ones I've done for YouTube. We are making the clock that I discussed this last time, and the educational aspect that I'm going after is I'm talking about designing for design theories for us regular people that don't have big art degrees or anything like that, just going out into our shops to build stuff and giving us some design principles we could work around so that our stuff looks appropriate. It doesn't look all funky. That's what I'm delving in deep in this clock build, is showing you how I design stuff and how I build stuff so aesthetically it looks good. And I really think it's going to come out pretty good. I'm excited about it. And this past 2 weeks I did watch the first series of American Horror Story, which if you haven't seen that thing is just weird, but it's kind of good. I liked it. I might watch another season. Thank God for Netflix, only $6.99 a month. Now on to market news. It's been 2 weekends since our last update, and 2 weekends ago, I was going to return to the Barton Creek market, which I did really, really well the last time I was there. Unfortunately, we just had like this monsoon that came through, so I didn't even attempt to pack up and go because all our stuff would have been it wouldn't have been destroyed, but I would have had to refinish a lot of stuff which would have offset all kind of profits I had. So I didn't go there. But But luckily the very next day the weather broke and I could go to that Hope Farmers Market, that very family-oriented farmers market that we went to. I only did about $80 there in sales. And you remember, our goal is always $500 because that's our break-even. I've explained where that number comes from cost of the materials to building cost to insurance to all that. You gotta incorporate all that. Our goal is $500 per event we set up at. That's the break-even. Well, we only did about $80 at that Hope after we paid our booth fee. So it was kind of a bust for us, but I did talk to a lot of people, and I am hopefully building up marketing for people to come back during the holidays. In fact, I returned to Hope Market this past week because they are participating in this East Austin Studio Tour, which is a monster event in Austin where something like 480 different artists in this walkable area of East Austin all open up their studios to invite people in so that they can talk about the craft, and some people will sell out their entire inventory during that one period each year. A lot of artists have started building up for this one event. And this farmers market was participating in that Austin Studio Tour because it's kind of right in the middle, and they had live music, a lot of events. They made it an event, but we just did not do too well. I had a lot of people come into the booth that saw our work and actually took our business card, wrote on it, all that kind of stuff, because they were saying they were already planning for their holiday markets. And I have yet to figure out a way to close those kind of customers without coming across as a hard-selling asshole. I mean, you can come out with that stuff. Well, please realize that all our stuff is unique. I mean, I can't really duplicate it. I might be able to make more, but it's not going to be exactly like these are here, because basically trees are different. And right now, this is my production run. We're closing up shop to move. I'm not going to be able to make any more. So it's kind of that. I feel like it's a hard sell, and I don't really like doing that anymore. I had to do that a lot when I was selling motorcycles. I'd rather do a soft sell technique, and I haven't figured out a nice way of doing that yet. So if you have an idea for that one, please leave in the comments and share it with everybody else. The Saturday before, we had our once a month get together at San Marcos Art Square, which is a wonderful event, but it's one of those things that sometimes Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, and the worst thing that can happen is once you get all set up, well, it's not the worst thing, but rain at 10 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock. That's about the time period people are getting out on a Saturday afternoon to plan social events outside. And if they look up in the sky, see rain, they're going to plan to do something indoor. Go to the movies or something like that, but not go for a nice stroll outside. And yes, the market goes to 4 or 5 o'clock a lot of these times, and there's 6 or 7 hours there that it's not raining that they could come out. But I've found time and time again that if it sprinkles or rains between 10 and 11 o'clock on these days, traffic just plummets, and that's what happened there. We did about $240 after booth fees and stuff there. So we hit half our goal. I didn't have a lot of people that are saying they were going to come back, but we have such a reputation at that particular market that we hit it once a month that people expected us to be there. I do plan this next week. We are going to tour all the art galleries that we are placed in, because I am scheduled in November to present them those holiday trees, and I kind of expect most of them will be wholesale to the holiday markets. So we'll see how that goes too. Now on to scrapers. Now to start our discussion on scrapers, let's real quickly talk about how plane works. A hand plane, basically you have the sole of the plane and the blade comes down and protrudes a little bit. The wood, you run that over the wood, and the wood will hit that little spot and it'll curl up here. Most modern day planes, like the Bailey styles, they have something called a chip breaker. That chip breaker is that little piece of metal that comes over here and it squeezes the blade, and it comes down to like a 64th of an inch, really close to the edge, but not quite on the edge. And that thing's sole purpose is to break the chips. If you don't have a chip breaker, you have a single iron plane. You see all those vintage guys or the Japanese planes where they plane along and they get that nice sheet of wood coming out. Well, that's great and wonderful when you're when your lumber is cooperating with you, so to speak. But if you have curly wood or like some oaks and stuff like that where they will tear out in front of the blade, the chip breaker theoretically will prevent a lot of that stuff on semi-cooperative wood. And what happens is the wood will hit that chip breaker and it will crumble back. It will put pressure back against it so it breaks it, so it folds over, so it doesn't leverage up, causing a split in front of the blade, which is tear out. Scrapers operate very similarly. Well, most scrapers do. And I'm talking about the card scrapers that we use and that wood turners use. Any kind of blade will cut as long as you have two angles that meet for infinity. If there's any roundness on your edge, so if you have two angles that meet 90 degrees, that angle right there, as long as there's no roundness there, it will cut. You can even have negative degrees, but as long as those two angles meet for infinity, they will cut. A scraper operates very similarly, except that the angle of the cutting edge is drastically lower. We are talking down, 10 degrees or so, real low. The reason why is basically, let me erase this one more time. You have something like a card scraper, and this is under magnification. We're looking at a card scraper directly to the side in this little picture right here. Okay, you have a 90 degrees. How most people explain card scrapers work is we turn a burr on the end. You actually fold that metal ever so slightly so there's a little curve and a point. But if you think about that, when you fold that metal over, it's almost like just a little piece of tinfoil on the edge. There's not much metal there. So it tends to crumble, it doesn't last very long, we have to re-put the edges on. But because there's that slight curve there, it has a natural chip breaker in it. The wood comes up to the cutting edge, which is basically two angles that meet for infinity, just at a very narrow angle. And then it hits that curve and crumbles around that way. And you can see that when you look at the chips, and you'll see that when we do the experiment in a second. So, we have the same things as we do in a plane. We have the cutting edge and a form of a chip breaker in the rest of the card scraper. Now, here's the point that I don't think a lot of people realize. You have an infinite number of variables of how you make that burr. I see a lot of YouTube videos out there that say, you must sharpen your scrapers this way, mill file, polishing stone, getting your burrs, folding it this way, folding it that way. There's a lot of things, but then you look at how they are using it, and those people are using card scrapers a specific way. Maybe just to level out an inlay, or to cover up the reversing grain around knots or on curly woods. So they prefer a burr a certain way because it works how they work the wood. So then they teach everyone that this is the only way you can use a card scraper. That's totally wrong. You've got lots of options here. You can turn no burr whatsoever and cut with that 90 degrees. That is the most durable edge on a card scraper. That edge will last a good long time because there's a lot of metal backing up that edge. It's 90 degrees. When you turn the burr, as we mentioned earlier, it's very thin and narrow. So it doesn't have a lot of metal backing it up. Now, if you are just trying to get rid of tear out and you're going to be doing something else like sanding afterwards, this might be the edge you want because it's so durable. But if you're trying to get a finished surface, the last thing to touch it, maybe you want a nice delicate burr to make nice wispy little shavings that just float off in the air, pretty flowers and such. Such that case, you might really want to do a nice polished edge on the end and just turn the slightest of burr so it takes a nice fluffy shaving. Well, maybe you want to blast through a knot, a very gnarly knot, and you want a big heavy saying, really get a lot of work done fast. You can do that with a scraper. The downside is, because it's such a narrow edge, you're going to end up resharpening it quite a bit, which is generally why when we use card scrapers, I will sharpen all 4 edges so that I have multiple spots that I can use until they get dull on both sides. You will in effect have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blades. Now, to explain this infinitely variable edges, the easiest way I know is to go to wood turning. We use scrapers in wood turning, and granted they get a bad rap in wood turning. A lot of people think it's not real turning because you're not cutting an edge. Those are the guys that are probably using a 90-degree edge on their scraper. And so let me show you how you can turn multiple variations of a burr so that you can see the difference in the shavings coming off and the end result on the wood. So in wood turning, we use scrapers quite a bit. This is a small bowl scraper that I use for making small ring boxes. It's got a nice curve on it, and you can do multiple variations of scrapers. Whenever I get to the scraping, I had this little diamond stone, a 1200 grit. I generally pop it on the edge so that I can refresh my burrs or take them off or add them back on, all through my turning process without leaving the lathe. And you have to do that one because the burr only lasts about 8 seconds. They've done that. This is high-speed steel. It should last a good long time. 8 seconds is about all you're going to get out of it. But I will get 8 seconds from each little part. So I can vary it so I can scrape with this for about a minute before I have to re-add the burr. I'm going to show you what a 90-degree, no burr scraping looks like. I've got my diamond stone. I'm going to lay it down flat. I'm going to sharpen it this way. I have in effect removed the burr. There's no way for me to take a photograph in this deep, high resolution to show you it, but I want you to trust me that there's no burr on it this way, there's no burr on it that way, and I'm even going to take it and round over that edge so it won't cut at all. 2 swipes on a 1200 grit diamond stone, and I've rounded over this edge, so let's watch it scrape. Nothing happened. So I'm holding it at an edge and I rotate it so it's slightly negative to 90 degrees as it presents to the wood, just like all scraping. And you can see almost next to no sawdust is coming off. The little sawdust that's in there is probably already in the pores of the wood. It's not cutting at all. Okay, so let's sharpen this up on the grinder real quickly to show you how we sharpen it there. So here I am at my grinder, and when I am turning, I basically set this platform right here specifically for my scrapers when I'm turning boxes and bowls, because I depend upon the scraper that much. And all my scrapers are set at the same angle. It is slightly less than 90 degrees, kind of like that. Okay, the exact angle I don't know, it's just slightly less. And when you sharpen it, I just place it to the grinder, come across. Now the wheel is turning this way, and this is the top of it, so you would think that the metal is being scraped off down to the bottom. But when you do that, the metal on the top, a certain amount of it is pushed over. So I actually have a fairly heavy burr right now that I can feel very easily with my thumb. I've scraped back past that curve I put on with that little diamond stone over there to new metal, and then that scraping pushed a little burr over. So let's see what this heavy burr does on the shavings. So once again, I've got my wood, I've got the tool rest set up to a point, just to show you that it is right at center, so that when I present the tool to it at the center line, I actually have to lift up on the tool a little bit so it gets a negative angle. And because that burr is curved over, it's curved over like that, that negative angle when I lift it up will engage that burr. Until you lift it up past 90 degrees, that burr will not engage. It'll be rounded over and you won't get any shavings. So, to prove that point, here we go. no shavings. I lift it up to get negative degrees, and now I'm getting shavings. Let me clear this off. Nice shavings. See those coming off. And because of the nature of that, I will get a fairly smooth finish. So I'm going to do this. This is poplar, fairly soft wood. Let me do this for a little bit, and you can see that after a little while, if I keep working that same spot, the shavings start to disappear, and I start getting sawdust. That burr is now gone. Okay, the burr is now gone. So I can go to another part of the blade and get the shavings back. Okay, so that's a fairly rough burr. And when you stop it, you can see I've got tear out on the edge from my other cutting tools, but the interior, it's smooth, but it's not as smooth as we could get it. So let's change the burr to get a finer shavings than these thick ones right here and see what we can do. So in order to get rid of this past burr, I'm going to come back to the diamond stone and I'm going to sharpen the top. And because that burr was curved over, I've just now removed that burr. Okay? Then I'm going to take what a lot of people use with their card scraper. Some kind of burnishing tool. Now, it used to be people would tell you use the back of a screwdriver or something like that. But that's because these card scrapers and the turning tools they were using were softer than the metal they use in the screwdrivers. Nowadays, a lot of times we have high-speed steel in both these, and because they mass produce them, a lot of times card scrapers are really hard steel. You need some kind of metal much harder than whatever you're trying to turn a burr on. For this example, I have a little tungsten rod and a little handle. I got this from Alan Lacer. I think he sells them on his website. They aren't that much money if you have a lathe and you can turn a handle, or you just want an octagon handle. It's a really cool tool. This is the only burnisher I use anymore. And how I burnish it is I will just lightly, ever so lightly, run it along the edge, and that will turn a new burr. And depending upon how much pressure you put down, you can turn a heavy burr or a light burr. I put enough pressure down so that my skin is just ever so slightly changing color to get the burr, a slight burr. Now let's look at the shavings we get coming off of the edge. So once again, I present it at slightly less than 90 degrees. I come over, and look at that. Much lighter, fluffier shavings. They aren't nearly as thick because that burr is so small. Okay? And the finish you get is a little bit nicer, a little bit smoother. I can feel a difference between here and here. Now, if I want to put back a heavy burr on it, all I have to do now, because I have that first burr, is I can just drag my burnisher over a lot harder. Notice my knuckles are changing colors now. That puts on a heavier burr, and I'm back to creating thicker shavings. I will hollow out my small ring boxes. Just kind of stick it in. And because it is scraping, I can go both directions. Against the grain and with the grain. Okay, now let's go back to our card scrapers again. There are an infinite number of variables on card scrapers. My preferred one is this little square one that I use all the time. I've been using it for 5 or 6 years now. You don't really wear these things out. I like the thicker ones because I can press a little bit hard. And the thin ones, their advantage supposedly is you can flex them quite a bit, so you can use a very specific spot on the burr. A lot of people like these thin ones. But I found that whenever I flex it a whole bunch, I get these little scallops that I don't particularly like. So I like the ones that are a little bit stiffer, so they're harder to, they don't get as much flex as you're going through. You have to flex them a little to get them to engage, as well as lean them forward, but it's not that much the thicker the hard scar scrapers. You can also get these kinds that are like French curves, so you can do interior curves using a specific spot all the time. They make other versions that'll do exterior curves and curves like that. So there's lots of variables on these. Thicknesses, metals, that kind of stuff. I find that the newer ones, I like the steel better than the vintage ones that you can pick up every now and then. The steel seems to be softer, which is why great-grandfather could use a screwdriver to turn a burr. A lot of times they sell these like steel with chrome polish and stuff like that. I'm finding that some of these modern day steels, I have little nicks in this, that they are harder than the they are softer than the scrapers. So when I burnish the edge, I'm getting little ridges, which tells me it's not working. This is one of the first ones I bought, and I haven't used it in years. I prefer this little tungsten one I have. Right like that. Very simple. It fits in the pocket when I'm working at the workbench or in my little apron coat, and it doesn't take up much space in the toolbox. Okay, whenever you are sharpening a scraper, pretty much everybody out there agrees that you pretty much have to start at a 90-degree edge, whether you're going to have a burr or not. And then after that point, it becomes like a religious cult on the way you do it. But pretty much everyone starts at 90 degrees. And you can do that several ways. A lot of people will start with a mill file. If I have a really rough edge on mine, that's the way I will start. It will remove a lot of metal really quickly. And most people will go to the table saw. They'll cut a slot in a board at 90 degrees, slot that in. That way you have a perfect 90 degrees. Me personally, if it's off a degree or two, I don't worry about it. So I will just sit here, kind of eyeball straight up and down, and cut the edge until I get a nice shiny edge all the way around. Now, if you do it this way, this is like going straight to the grinder on my turning stones. I have a burr on the edge. This will cut. Got my workbench right here. I can take glue shavings off. There we go. One swipe. And I have shavings. And those are shavings. That's not sawdust. So I have a rough burr on here. And for most of my work, that is good enough. Because I might be going back with 400 grit sandpaper after this. I'm just using this to get rid of plain track marks, or maybe I have a little tear out in one section around knot. That's good enough. So if you're doing a lot of scraping, you leave your little mill file out. Every now and then when they remove that burr, just come over a few screw scrapes, get back to work. Don't waste a lot of time. Now, I don't really use this mill file. As you saw me, I had that little diamond stone on the lathe. I have two diamond stones. These go in my traveling toolkit. One's at 1200, one's at 400. And my sharpening method when I'm doing demonstrations is I got 400, so I drop it, 1200 to reestablish the edge, and then I got a piece of leather to do the honing. I'll come over to my diamond stones and just boom, 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 and then get back to work. And it gets me a little bit nicer edge. And once again, shavings. I'll zoom in for you. So here's my 1200 grit diamond stone. A couple swipes, keeping it as 90 degrees as possible. Clear it off, and you can see even going across the grain, I am getting nice shavings straight off the blade. And it's cutting off all the glue marks and stuff like that. It works really, really well. With just that slight cut, I am getting shavings, not sawdust. So I know I have a cutting edge. Now if I want to get it finer, what you do is you remove that burr. So I'll turn it sideways, take that burr off, and then just like I did with my turning tools, I will use my burnisher. And some people say you have to use a burnisher. You start at 90 degrees and basically you run it back and forth, and this is flattening out the mill marks left by your stones or your bastard mill, and then you slowly rotate it over to a certain degree, and that'll give you a finer edge. That will take an even finer cut, but it's kind of like using a smoothing plane with a very fine cut. You end up having to do a lot of work to get much scraping done. I prefer using a thicker burr myself and then touching it up later on. Now I have a board over here that's straight from the bandsaw. So I have a board here that's straight off the bandsaw. This is a piece of maple. Here are the ridges, fingernails on the ridges. They are all over the place, and it is definitely not smooth. I'm not sure if you can see those mill marks in the camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape it. Now, what kind of edge do you think I want? Do you think I want the fine, fluffy shaving, or do you think I want one that's going to get the work done? Obviously, I want one that's going to get the work done. So I will grab my file and I will push down hard to flatten that edge. And I am never going to do this in real life. I will take a hand plane to this. But let's look at the grain. Okay, my grain is running downhill this way, so if I were planing it, this is the way I go. So let's reverse it and go against the grain to show you the flexibility of a scraper. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm still making shavings, so that burr is still there, but it's getting a little bit less, so I'll just move over a little bit. And there we go. That is as smooth as any plane I would use to get. And let's see if I can get the lighting. Can you see? The mill marks are gone. I have some mill marks down here because I didn't plane up there, but mill marks are gone. That easy. So if you're getting tear out in a certain section, grab your card scraper. And as I alluded to earlier, it doesn't matter what direction the grain is going when you're using a card scraper, because the chip breaker on it is so close, you are crumbling the wood over, so it doesn't have a chance to split ahead of the cutting edge. So you can go against the grain or with the grain, which makes it so nice for when you are leveling out inlays, where you might have one board that's going different directions of an entirely different species. Or if you're having to repair stuff around a knot or wavy wood, or if reversing grain direction in one spot and you just can't get to it. A card scraper, cheap and easy solution for that one. And you have an infinite number of ways to sharpen it and use it. It just depends upon how you want it to interact with the burr. That is entirely up to you. And that's something I don't think many people talk about. It seems to be that they want you to set the burr a certain way, which means that the card scraper would only be used a certain way for a certain application. Lots of different variables here. So grab one of these, try them out. You can pick them up for a few bucks. I hope that made it worth your while for watching this little lunch discussion. Please remember, we have weekly videos coming out now in the future, so please subscribe, tell a friend. If you would like to help support us, I could really use help buying lumber to make the materials. Otherwise, you're going to be seeing projects made out of 2x12s, just like everything in this shop is. So feel free to donate us for a little material fee. There's a little blue button on my YouTube channel if you want to donate through YouTube, or you can visit my website, wortheffort.com. There is a support page there that will show you other ways you can help us out. And in the future, I hope to have some t-shirts and stuff like that available. I also want you to remember one last thing. It is always worth the effort to learn, create, and share with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.